karakia. Karakia tātou, tueki ringia, tueki raro, tueki roto, tueki waho, tua tātou te tangata, ki te kaupapa o te hui nei, ki te kaupapa o te rangi nei, mauri ora ki a tātou katoa. Welcome. We do have media with us. Catherine's on Zoom. I don't think we have any councillors or wardens on Zoom, no. This meeting is being recorded, it'll be available on Council's YouTube channel. And hearing assistance hardware is available for people in the public seating area should that be needed. Apologies. We have an apology from Councillor Greening and an apology from Deputy Mayor Bryan for lateness. So if someone's happy to move the apologies. Councillor Walker, second Councillor Ellis. All those in favour, please say aye. Please say aye. Aye. Those against, carried. Sorry, just a little moment. Yes, I've nothing here for the Mayor, but
Can I just add that I've just been on the phone and he's actually at the airport trying to get to Wellington. Good luck in this weather.
thank you, though. No speakers in public forum. Are there any declarations of interest? Nil. No late items. We've got some minutes to confirm from the Animal Control Subcommittee meeting held on the 24th of Feb. Somebody happens to happy to move that they were true and correct record. Councillor Mailing and seconded by Councillor Kinnemont. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. And the minutes of the Animal Control Subcommittee meeting held on the 20th of March, that we confirm they were true and correct record. We might just switch that round. Moved by Councillor Kinnemont and seconded by Councillor Mailing. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you. And note that the 11th of March Environment and Reg minutes will go to the next meeting for confirmation due to the short timing between meetings. Which brings us to our reports. 5 reports today, and the first is Group Manager Kim. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take my report as read and note also that the attachment, which shows a summary of how the reforms are coming together, is on the PowerPoint slide up here. We've just got one particular slide we're showing, but if councillors have questions around that, that means that we can access it pretty easily. I do have a couple of points to add. You'll note that the thrust of the Group Manager's report is around is a reform update, and it's framed around the Resource Management Act and its replacement, and it's looking to show the connections of that reform to the Building and Local Government Acts also. The attachment that I've just referred to is a Te Uru Kahika summary, and they have taken the work done by Environment Canterbury and presented to councillors there and disseminated across the network. And as per the council conversation yesterday, it means that by leveraging off the work that was done through Environment Canterbury and then circulated through Te Uru Kahika, it means that our staff don't have to do the sort of work that's involved in bringing that connected picture to you today, which is up on the screen. Now, also, as noted yesterday, the Minister of Building and Construction has made further announcements. So over the last week, and they were referred to by the Mayor. He has written to all councils, and I think councillors have seen that letter, regarding the outcome of the investigation into remote inspections. The summary of that is that remote inspections are encouraged but not required. But he has separately announced a new option around self-certification schemes, allowing trusted builders, plumbers and trainlayers to sign off their own work on simple residential homes. Also signalling that BC building consent authorities must complete 80% of their inspections within 3 working days. the whole changes are expected to speed up construction of around 3,000 homes nationwide annually, and there will be guidance to the building consent authorities to follow as to how to implement those new requirements. From a Tasman District Council perspective, we envisage some challenges, and staff are intending to form an internal working group as these arrangements impact on multiple departments. Matters here today, if councillors want to explore any of the Building Act reforms beyond what has been tabled in the report. Second issue I want to touch on is regarding the wastewater discharge issue. So that was something that there was a wastewater discharge signalled in the last GM report, and our commitment was to make sure we brought that through to resolution. That's discussed in the current report, along with another event which we're currently looking into. The note there is that the law, at the moment, our plan does not provide for overflows at all. So that means that when we're looking into these matters, it's about the defence that is provided under the law, and that is what our compliance team has traditionally been focused on, considering the defence against the event. Recently, Council approved a submission to the wastewater standard that has been proposed by Taumata Arawai. That was, discussion occurred through the Policy and Strategy Committee. What I'd say here is if those standards are adopted, what it will mean is that all existing controlled overflow parts of the treatment plant and their bypasses will need a resource consent. Our compliance team will then have to consider whether the conditions of consent are being met, as well as any defences that they're currently looking at that may continue to be provided for. So there's a change in the way wastewater is managed in the year. Also want to touch on that the Ministry for the Environment have released a consultation document for proposed amendments to the Waste Minimisation Act and Litter Act. It includes creating a modern, effective compliance regime in their minds and enabling efficient and effective controls for littering and other types of mismanaged waste. The staff here have not are considering those changes, and a call hasn't been made as to whether they want to promote a submission, but my sense is it's highly likely that this council would want to engage in that process. And today I would appreciate an indication from councillors as to whether they would like to be involved in the development of a submission, the issue being that the timeline is for the 1st of June, the submissions are due by then, and that would mean that it would be before the next meeting of this committee. So if we were to get approval from council prior to submitting, it would have to go through one of the other committees or could come back here for retrospective approval. But either way, we think this is something that is actually quite material to the district, and that we would appreciate having councillor involvement in the development of the submission if we go down that track. Finally, the report outlines a few bouquets that have come our way in recent times, and I think from time to time it's worth pausing to acknowledge that there's some really good things do happen in the regulatory space. And there's a little part of the report which is dedicated to that, and I just want to bring that to your attention. And I also want to add that we've just had some feedback from Maritime New Zealand that relates to our new joint all-spill regional coordination role that Kay sets up for us. And that feedback stated that it was the recent all-spill exercise was a well-planned activity that showcased the current ability of Nelson and Tasman working together well. And the comment was that with good professional relationships between the two harbour master teams and the interoperability across the two councils. And that was stated as a marked improvement over the last 3 years. So that was the formation of that role was something that we brought through this committee earlier on in the March meeting. And it's what that shows is it's already showing providing value for the way that we're coming together and working with our Nelson colleagues to deal with this obligation we have around management of all spills. So that's a positive note to end on. And with that, I invite questions.
Thank you, Kim. Hi, Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Kim, as well for your report. Just got a couple of questions. The first one is with regards to the proposed NES to standardise the rules for granny flats. So am I correct in assuming that what the government is thinking is that you wouldn't need a resource consent for land use because it maybe would be a permitted activity, but particularly in rural areas, you potentially could still need consents for discharge or for land disturbance, or is that the regime that we might be looking at?
Through the chair, I guess for us, exactly what it means is will come when we have the version of the National Environment Standard that's being thinking about. But as councillors will appreciate, this is a complex area regarding where that line is drawn in terms of what folk can do in terms of their buildings and what they need additional authorisations to do. So we're very much engaged in that. Waiting for the detail to emerge so we can get a clear sense of where that line is. I don't know whether Katrina wants to add anything to what I've just noted here.
Good morning. Through the chair, not really, but just along the right lines there. That those kind of consents, given the impact on environment, would be required to still have a consent. But as Kim's alluded to, I think the devil will be in the detail, and with what they're bringing through, they're not at the moment, and probably not giving council any more heads up than they are the public and the media. So, yeah, I think it's important in that report that Kim's referred to, that having an internal working party across so many areas that this is going to touch, and getting ourselves aligned and ready, because I think there will be an influx of them come through. I think people are saying to hold off. The Tiny Homes Association had a meeting this week and said that, yeah, they're already seeing that people are starting to talk about holding off until this new rules and laws come through. Yeah.
I guess it would be easy for, I guess, maybe a member of the public to sort of read without resource consent and think, oh, I can just go for it. But instinctively, particularly in rural areas, I just don't see it as being that straightforward. Anyway, that's just my thought. Then I just had a question around changes to building consenting and this idea of having trusted operators. Do we get any insights into the thinking around where liability might lie when you have trusted operators signing off on their own work?
Through the chair, I'll provide some comments on that, but I'll invite Matt to come up and add any sort of additions. From what we understand, the government expectation is the council would play a part in determining who these trusted and reliable folk are and what standards they need to meet. And as part of that, those people that do enter into that space, because it's an opt-in arrangement, would need to carry that level of insurance that allowed them, if something went wrong, to fall back on. And I do know of a recent example where there's been a private building consent authority established, and in their endeavours to secure insurance, they could not get it within this country, and they need to get it internationally. So I think this is far from clear how this will actually play out. And then there's quite a lot of implications and complications for us to work through. But it's just another example that the world that we know is changing, and our job is to adapt as the reform comes through, have our say as we have had through submissions. But really, the devil does continue to be in the detail, and the detail's not with us just yet. But I'll hand over to Matt whether he can give you any more insights on that.
Morning, through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, there's nothing really to add there because there's so much detail that's lacking at the moment, and it's likely to come around December this year. So yeah, it's a bit of a tricky one.
And if I might, Chair, may I just take the opportunity to congratulate Leif on his recognition as noted in the report. I think that's really excellent, and congratulate him.
Thank you, Councillor. While you're there, Matt, just a question from me. So the idea that in terms of the change to the Building Act business, will require BCAs to complete 80% of building inspections within 3 working days.
For us,
think-
we
would
are within that at the moment.
Sorry?
We're 2 working days at the moment.
Yeah.
And we are about to fill in a survey for NB on how we monitor our inspection times. And currently it's a manual. We have to manually monitor it. So we'll have to look at some sort of system to monitor that in the future. So that's where we're at with that.
And in our district, do you think that delays in inspections, so builders waiting for inspectors to turn up, that there is an issue in our district around that? So I just don't know sometimes whether you know how much basis there is to some of the changes that are coming in terms of what's presented up front and then what perhaps the reality is and behind might well be justified. But I just feel like I never quite know. So the idea that this is going to be a game changer in terms of building projects not being held up because people are waiting for inspectors to arrive and the value that's been attributed to that.
Yeah, for Tasman and Nelson, we've always been sort of met those targets in the last couple of years. So it's more targeted around the Christchurch, Auckland.
Yeah.
They're waiting up to a week. I think Christchurch was 7 weeks at one point. So it's to cater for those sort of areas rather than us.
Thank you.
At this stage. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions for Matt while he's here? Councillor Alice?
Thank you. Just as a carry on from that, I mean, we do carry a risk with if we have an increase in building activity like we did when we had issues before. And so we carry a risk if there is a sudden uptake in any sort of building activity that we've got to try and fill that gap very quickly. What are the consequences if we do have that kind of upturn again of not fulfilling that 3-day turnaround? Because I mean, it's tricky getting staff, and we can't, if we get 50 inspections that we've got to get done out of nowhere, and we can't just ring somebody up and say, come and have a look. So how do we manage that risk, and what are the consequences if we fail to meet it?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm not sure what the consequences are through the government at this stage, but for us, we would, we're still looking at remote inspections, which would help us out. The government is talking about sort of low risk inspection types as well. So we've tried a few of these things in the past, trying to get some of these building companies to have a quality assurance program, so we can, not carry out likes of a post-line inspection. Just look at some of the lower risk sort of inspections where we could cut those down, and currently we do photographs and bits and pieces if we're stuck. So, but to try and get someone in-house to do inspections, there's not much availability out there. But it's on our radar to keep it running along.
Thanks, Matt. Councillor Mayling?
My questions have Kim to start with. Kim, in terms of the timelines that you had up there, are you seeing more slippage? Because we've certainly seen it to date. Is it going to continue, or do you think they'll meet those timelines, particularly the national policy statements, which have a big effect?
Through the chair, the only answer I can give is that the officials are, at every point in time, are communicating that those timelines are real and that the government is pushing for them. And it's not really signalled in advance when that there's going to be slippage until there is slippage, and then a new timeline set. So the intent seems to be to drive the reform along the way that we had it up there before, and that sort of framework. And there's elections and all sorts of things in the minds of the government to making sure they get certain things done at certain times. But sometimes the reality does creep in that some of these things is not as simple as what they've thought when they've tackled them, and that seems to be the reason for the delays, as opposed to not actively pushing it out. It seems to be there's some quite complex issues that they have to confront and deal with, and that's where the delays are coming from.
And my next question is probably going to end up at an operations committee, but it's about capacity. So if we have more granny flats or a big increase in urban areas, that to me will impact on stormwater. And if you see the townhouse developments we have now, they're having to put in retention tanks. I'm looking at the ones up in top of Oxford Street here where they had to put in retention tanks. So stormwater capacity, and the other would be the increase in wastewater. So if they don't need a consent, how do we cover those particular items in our urban areas? Because I would have thought in certain places we are at capacity.
Through you, Madam Chair, they do still have to notify us before they start and when they complete. So hopefully people will notify us that they're doing this work, and that's how we'd capture it. We have to rely on people being honest.
And I've got one last thing, and it's more of a comment really. In terms of the overflow from that weather event, that will be infiltration into our wastewater system out of our stormwater systems, which as a chair of NRSBU, we don't control that. That's actually a Tasman Council function. And I know that we have a program to reduce infiltration, but it's a never-ending cat that you're chasing the tail. And I know that Nelson City have a consent for overflows due to certain events, but we don't. And we've increased the capacity, and that's why we had that error of the new, the increased capacity and resilience with new wastewater pipes, but we still have a problem with infiltration.
Through the chair. So yes, and that's what I alluded to. That's because there's an absence of an authorisation of any form in our planning framework, then the obligation transfers to the compliance team to establish whether or not the defences that are provided for in the Act are brought into play. So each and every time it's a case of, well, that needs to be established as to what action we're taking. So, the future is around providing a national authorisation for a degree of wastewater overflow. So it takes us more towards the framework, say, that Nelson are operating under, but exactly where that line is drawn, at what level of overflow is acceptable, and then what happens if they're exceeding that, that's the work that lies ahead of us. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So I'm looking at 3.10 on the Connections to Building Act reform, and I hear that Kim Drummond's given us a bit of an update. Just interested to understand, obviously the exemption will require simple design, You've all got that in front of you, and still apply through the Project Information Memorandum, so the PIM. And we've gone out to consult with our community on fees and charges. So I'm just wondering, what's the change between what we've been doing to this new system? What's involved for our staff and what extra costs are there? Because this is something we're consulting on. That's my first question.
Through the chair, my response to that is the system that we're consulting on is the system as we know it. And so that's the way it's been working up until now, because the government's intentions is to change both the Resource Management Act and the Building Act to enable a different integrated outcome. And all I've done so far is signalled that they're making progress on the RMA front, so the National Environment Standard is close, but we haven't yet got the parallel package with how the Building Act's going to be adjusted. So we still don't know what the world that we're navigating into precisely will look like. So all we can do at the moment is put out there to our community what are the costs of running their current system, and that's what's in the fees and charges review. I agree that the uncertainty here is undesirable, but these are matters that are out of our control, because unlike the RMA, which gives council quite a leverage in terms of development of plans, the Building Act doesn't give council that sort of leverage. It's centrally imposed.
And if I may, a second question. So if you look on our report 6.9, and it talks, and Councillor Mayling has mentioned it, around the fact that there was the discharge and there is no enforcement action warranted. So we've made that stance, we've made that call based on evidence that we have. I'm just wondering how we get to that when hypothetically we have a case in our community where we're making enforcement actions when we actually haven't gathered the data as yet, because hypothetically a person's waiting for information from us. How do we line up and make the rule the same for everybody over a breach or a suspected breach? And my last point is not a question. My last comment is I hear, you know, that this is an ever-moving feast when it comes to what's coming out of Wellington. And I hear from staff today that potentially it could be December. I just want to know, how do we take our community on that journey so they understand and they have a clear expectation, or well, pretty much that they're coming along with us knowing that this playing field forever changes and moves, and that potentially for our tiny home community / those wanting granny flats, there's not a clear answer. So as much as it's good news that government are looking at implementing this, it's a long way off.
So through the chair on that one, at any point in time, what is in play, is there's a fairly robust set of processes and procedures to support that. So the uncertainty comes with what changes may lie ahead in the future. But clearly, what we've got in front of us now and the way we go about it is determined by standard processes and procedures that we've got in place. One of the main reasons for using this committee to keep you informed of the way the world may change, because you don't know it changes until it does change, is to communicate that where things are likely to go, over what time frames, and what may or may not be adjusting. But that is about talking about what the possibilities of the future. But at all times, our teams are required to work within the law as it stands. So that's a challenging environment for the council to operate in, and it's as you've noted, it can be a challenging situation for our community who are trying to think about what the future looks like. So we can only provide as much certainty as we can, but certain things are out of our control. On the other matter, I guess our enforcement, our capability spans a plethora of acts. And all of those acts have different requirements. They have different evidential bases. They have different discretions provided in some place and not in others. And so our regulatory unit has quite a disciplined approach to all of the things that goes about and what steps it takes given the circumstances that it's presented with. And that's very much based on the facts of the situation and the evidence that we've been able to gather, and indeed, in some cases, the evidence we need to gather. So in order to resolve some situations, we need more information, and we have to go about collecting that information before we can form a view. So I guess I'd like elected members to have a sense of faith that those matters are deeply ingrained into the way that we do our work and how we conduct ourselves. And that everything is quite measured, and we've got systems in place to make sure that when a sanction is appropriate, that there's a whole process that leads to that, not just an individual, thinking that might be the best action. We've got all sorts of systems in place to make sure all steps we take are measured, considered, and appropriate to the circumstance.
Thanks, Kim. Councillor Kinnamonth and then Councillor Dakey.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Like Councillor McKenzie, I'd also like to congratulate Leif Piggott on his award. Well deserved. A lot of mahi gone before this, and please pass on to him my thanks for that. The question I've got is on page page 7, clause 6.10. On the 21st of April, you had a discharge, diluted discharge of wastewater into the Waimea estuary. Given that this is a red button, hot button topic in my village, are you able to tell me where the discharge was and is the public notified of it?
Through the chair, no, I think we signalled that we were looking into it at the last group managers report for the last committee meeting. We've sort of refrained from bringing the specifics of these events into this sort of documentation, so I don't have the additional detail about the event, just that it is, and we recognise the community interest in making sure that wastewater discharges are appropriately investigated. And if they're unlawful, then action's taken. So it was because of that public interest that we brought that matter to the surface to say that we're aware of it. It had been in the public arena that it had occurred, so there was media coverage of it. And we just wanted to reassure elected members that all steps were being taken to investigate its cause. And it's that process that I talked about that would have been followed to form the view that there was no enforcement action necessary.
Thank you. Councillor Dakey.
Thank you, through the chair. Question for you, Kim. With that discharge at Beach Road, the good news is it's from a planned upgrade. So the council is committed to doing significant work in Beach Road to prevent these overflows happening again. So unfortunately, in this case, contractor had a lot of measures in place. I know in your report, and they all failed in sequence, which sometimes happens. So they did the best they could, and we have to be reasonable. My question is, with these outflows, though, you just mentioned the reporting of, as a regulator, do we record the scale, the volume? Is there some sort of environmental measure? Like you said there, we probably in the next report, we won't get specifics about the overflow that Mr. Kinmoff mentioned there. I think it would actually be valuable to have some sort of gauge presented to the committees around the scale, maybe not the specifics in meters or cubic meters, but just something around the scale of some of these, because you can have a minor thing that can trigger it or a major event. And I just feel as a committee, it would be useful to have that report either through this or some other measure to inform the public of, well, it was more significant or it wasn't. So any comments on that?
Through the chair on that one, two thoughts come to mind. The first is that's entirely, I think, what the government's thinking in terms of its standards, that it needs, certain things are going to be provided for, but, at a certain level and they shouldn't. So that's where the new standards are going to say where the offences sort of start to click in. The second thing is that we twice a year come to this committee with a more in-depth summary of all the enforcement action across the different domains. And that is the area that we can perhaps provide a little bit more breakdown of the magnitude of in the wastewater space, because clearly it is of wider interest. We could do a little bit of extra work there to show the scale of the events that we obviously we report back on the number of them. So what I'm hearing is it would be useful to actually differentiate between the scale of it, and I think we can do that.
Yeah, thank you for that. Especially when we look at, often we're faced with choosing where we invest in infrastructure, and understanding the volume and the actual scale of the overflows and the occurrence is actually quite useful in a granular level. So would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think I just noticed in some of the social media commentary around this matter, generally through that event. I know that there's been some publicity that we've put out in the past, perhaps in my first term here, around the ways in which the systems get infiltrated and out of private property owners' setups and connections that shouldn't be there and all of that. But it might be a pointless exercise, but there was some commentary in response to say, actually, a part of this problem is these other areas that are difficult for us to control. But I don't know if there's if it's helpful for us to pick that up again I don't know what we're doing currently to help property owners understand the impact they can be having on the system as well through gully traps that are low and unhelpful. I'm not being very helpful here, but I'm aware that people don't generally seem to understand that, the commenters, there's, useless council again, it doesn't have enough kit to take care of all of this. But there are wider issues in it too.
So thoughts on that one? I'll just, I think there's something we can do in that space in terms of the report back to this committee. I think we can talk about, what is the communication strategy for putting this information out. So that's something I'll ask Shane to take on board when Sean puts his wastewater report together, Shane. I think we can start to, capture the efforts that the council is taking to educate people around how these things are coming about, and in so doing, maybe help prevent them. Yeah,
thank you. In terms of, and thank you for your report. Look, it's very helpful for me, and I'm sure with many other councillors, to have this regular reporting on the myriad of reform aspects that are coming through. They're hard to keep a track of, and it's a really helpful aspect to the committee, I think. In terms of the cabinet paper suggesting that an entity perform compliance and enforcement functions and environmental monitoring functions centrally and remove these from councils, I haven't quite picked up the rationale for that. Like, what's the issue? So what, councils aren't performing this effectively enough? Are we seeking some efficiency somehow? The people would still be on the ground, surely to goodness. I just can't quite get the background to that.
Back to you. I think where the government's getting its advice, first and foremost, started with an expert advisory group, which came together to give the government advice on what it thought the future RMA would look like. And that's where the genesis of the desirability of standardising compliance in the RMA space across the country sort of comes from. Now, whether that was based on a problem definition or basically a view that would be desirable, I think you have to go into that report to form a view as to which one of those ledgers drove the recommendation. And then the second thing was when they come back to Cabinet then said, well, if we were going down that track, in my reading of the lie of the land, if we're going down that track for compliance, maybe we could consider something similar for environmental monitoring. So I think that's how the story's got to where it is at the moment. And none of this actually lands or exists in any draft legislation at this point in time. So these are still, I guess you would say, they're policy ideas. They're not formed from the front line. They're formed from, a perspective that it would be desirable to standardise some of this. My reading of the tea leaves on this is there's no agency that's putting its hand up to take on such a function, certainly in the compliance space, that the nuances of regional situations are such that it is very difficult for existing agencies to envisage a one-size-fits-all sort of approach across the country. And so there's no real candidates emerging for that. And what the government's going to do with that, I don't know, but it may well be that the status quo does continue as opposed to move into the centralised sort of model. Both of those options, I think, are still live at this stage, and I don't think there's any firm, grounded analysis that would suggest one has got advantages over the other at this point in time.
Thank you. In your report, you speak about the Wharepapa Arthur Marble Aquifer and the two-day course being offered in the Waigaroa catchment. There's a lot of work going on over there among the community, the farmers on the recharge area, Manawhina ki Mohua, whānau, and there's quite a few different things coming together there. There's some really lovely working in. There's been a waterways forum that's formed, and we had some very interesting presentations to that recently. And And also I sat in on, I'm gonna, not remember the name of, Alex from EOS presented, did a presentation a couple of days ago. So Mountains to the Sea Trust. Jane might help me out here. She knows about those, but where which is funded by MFE, and there's that you can seek to have your catchment mapped. So all the data that's available that sits with council and other places gets pulled in together. So it was pretty interesting around a whole range of things. And so there's all these different pieces of work going on in terms of that was sought by UKM to be involved in that, and Tasman Bay Guardians are involved too. So, you know, to think about, thank you, Jane, for your connection into the university, and that being a key aspect of how come this course is being offered in the Bay. That's very helpful to council. We've got, you know, nice acknowledgement to Leaf for his work, and it's we've got staff involved in all sorts of areas around the country, actually, at a national level, that are really bringing values. The values going out from, you know, staff's expertise, but it's bringing it back into our region as well. And it's very helpful to see these collaborations happening. And I think because of the importance of the valley over there in terms of the springs and the extraordinary aquifer system, this will, you know, add a lot to that whole area that we've got a big hand in as council, actually, in ensuring the WCO is going to be. You don't uphold a WCO, do you? What do you do with it? Implement it? Yeah, so acknowledgements there for that, and yeah. It's hard. I think it's hard. It's not always that easy to realise what's going on in some of our wards and districts, and there's quite a lot going on in that area. So I appreciate that. Yes.
So just building on that, so you know, we've talked here about the work that Jane's done to bring the academia to town, and you've acknowledged that. But sitting in behind that is the team that Mercer Langford pulls together, which has got eyes on all of these things. And I don't know whether Rob wants to have a word about that, but it's quite a you know, it's quite a persuasive you know, approach where, you know, all the connections are coming in through, and there is a team in council that's got eyes on all the moving parts. And I think you'll you know, really appreciate the acknowledgement that you've made for those collaborative efforts that the council's contributing to. And I don't know whether Rob wants to add an extra word or two to that, but hats off to your team. Yeah.
Is someone happy to move that we receive the report of Councillor Dowler and seconded by Councillor Butler?
Ask about whether councillors want to be involved in that case.
Oh, yes, yes. So Kim suggested there might be some of you that want to be involved in the waste minimisation, little work group around that.
Yeah, this is a particular reform that there is a waste committee, but the Ministry for the Environment have come up with some suggestions around changing various acts that feed into that. So there's an opportunity for the council to contribute to a submission that would draw off the work of the committee and actually frame that up as to how we think those changes could work for us. So staff are currently considering forming up, you know, a unit from across the council to come together on that, and the opportunity exists for elected members to be, you know, part of that as a sort of a subcommittee type thing. So when the submission comes through one of the committees for endorsement, there's a bit of a sense that it's been developed with elected members rather than on behalf of.
Is that a yes? Thank you. Thanks, Butler. Thank you, Councillor Butler. Anybody else? Any other takers? Councillor Mailing, thank you.
On.
Waterwecker interested?
Yeah, go on.
Tough sell, isn't it? Is it you?
Yeah, go on.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Maru. Thank you very much. I think it's been helpful in the past where we've had councillors involved early on in forming up these submissions and positions. So we've got a mover and seconder for the report, receiving the report. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against carried. Thank you, Kim. And before we move on to the Harbour Master's report, an apology for the mayor was supposed to have been forwarded, but didn't come through. So I'd just like to put that now. If somebody having to move, that we accept the apology for the mayor, who's maybe in the airport or maybe heading to Wellington. Councillor Walker, seconded by Councillor Mailing. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against carried. Thank you. Welcome, Peter. Over to you. You can take the report as being read, and it's I know it would have been read very closely by many because it's pretty interesting. Thank you.
Sure enough. And I'll take it as read and welcome questions.
Councillor Butler.
Okay, thanks for your report, Pete. I just wanted to get a bit of a follow-up on the voluntary program, the iwi Launch Warden program, and how that went, and particularly in relation to maybe Tata Beach, where we have challenges about different modes conflicting. I mean, you're giving a pretty positive feedback about it, and are you anticipating that you'll be able to pull that together next time, and also whether or not you are considering any sort of compliance role?
Through the chair, so they don't really there's no one really wanting to do the compliance role. So the people who are doing it over there were really keen to avoid that. They really just want to be there for education. And the surveys are really useful for us for the data. The big hiccups we had this year were around timing, in that they missed the busy season. So they weren't able to go out until, I think it was about the 7th of January that they got their first day out there. So we're going to do this again. I'd love to bring it right forward. Right forward to before Christmas. So they were actually doing it over the busy season. They did go to Tata Beach on a couple of occasions that I'm aware of. The other problem we had was the surveys that were done, we couldn't do them digitally, which means it doesn't geotag the reference. So the data we've got, we've put it into the system, but it all got entered into the system in Motueka in the office. So it's geotagged to Motueka rather than to the specific location it was taken. So if we were to do it again, we'd also need to make sure we're providing a tablet to do it on scene, and then that data can be used a lot more accurately for getting the messages across. I still see it as being really successful. I've written the report to go to the Safer Boating Forum, and it will be essentially up to them. We'll put another report in or another grant application in to get money to do the same thing again next year. But it'll be up to them whether it gets approved or not. Hopefully we've done enough this year to prove it's worthwhile, and that next year we can do it even better.
So in terms of costs, you've mentioned the tablets, but what actually are the costs? Clothing, what are the costs of that program, given it's a voluntary program?
So it's not a voluntary program. So there was a contract with MTM for the services. So we contracted them for 150 hours of educational program around boat safety, and that was gifted. So that was money given to us from the Safer Boating Forum.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maru.
Awesome, thank you. Pete, firstly, I just want to acknowledge the last sentence on your 4.8 in terms of no infringements have been issued yet, and you're providing time for everybody to comply. So in terms of that education process, I just want to acknowledge that I guess that's the way to win. One of my key questions is around your 5.3 and 5.4 and the ongoing safety aspect of the Motueka Channel. So I just want to, I guess, tease out from a Harbour Master's perspective, with the lack of maintenance that's taking place there and the bits you've itemised there, should we be more concerned over safety aspects of the Motueka Channel?
So there's several factors, I guess, with the Motueka Channel, and I think we could probably safely group Mapua Channel into this one as well. And there's probably a few other channels around this.
That one out there. We've got a boat. Sorry, Pete.
So there's increasing emphasis, I guess, across the whole country, really, around safe navigation and marking through the ATONs or aids to navigation, and trying to bring them up to speed. Motueka Channel has, over the years, has had lots of different navigational aids used to mark it. The majority of them are currently mussel floats that don't stay vertical to meet the requirements. They can't lean over more than 7 degrees if they're lit, otherwise the lights don't actually shine across the water. And currently ours fall right over to 90 degrees. So that is quite a large risk. We've replaced this year the outer markers so that there is proper approved navigational aids on the entrance. However, we've still got about 17 more to do, provided I can do that next year. That's where we're aiming. We don't have any role in maintaining a channel. We just have the role in making sure the channel that is there naturally is marked appropriately.
So just if I can, Madam Chair, so in terms of absolutely understand no responsibility for maintaining, but in its current, I guess, absence of maintenance, are there safety concerns from a harbour master's perspective for the Motueka Channel currently? And I guess that's across both when the tide's in, when the tide's out.
Certainly when the tide's out, it's a lot more challenging. Depths are going down to sort of 0.6 and 0.5 metre now at low tide. So without a level of understanding of that channel, I wouldn't be recommending recreational users going in and out at low water without prior knowledge of where those shallow spots are, or if they do, they need to really slow down and take their time coming in and out.
Thanks, because just as important, I differentiate between your expertise in safety and the maintenance, another department. Going on to the Sentinel, and I may have missed it, so I know it came up early in annual plan stuff, and it wasn't this year. But have we seen? Has it been flagged that Sentinel's been up for renewal in this timeline for a while? And have I missed it, or because I thought we spent significant maintenance last year on this thing? So I'm just interested in, is it something I've missed? Has it been planned that it is up for renewal? Yeah, can you enlighten me in terms of that?
I mean, I guess the short answer is no. It's not really been signalled properly until recently. I would probably dispute the significant maintenance, and it's not actually had significant maintenance spent on it other than buying new engines a few years ago. And if we were to follow what would be a standardised system for maintenance, you normally look at spending 10% of the value of a vessel every year. So for every year you don't spend that, it adds up cumulative, and that's sort of where we're at now. Is the longer we leave it, the more this vessel will cost.
Okay, and so I take it, so moving forward, you'll have hard conversations with your ELT member, and that'll just be something that keeps coming up. And I think my last question is, and it's on 10.3, and I understand the changes in staffing, and you currently got 2.5 FTEs. But if I'm reading this right, the current plan is to have Monday to Friday. Does that mean we have nobody on the water on Saturdays and Sundays currently, or in the interim?
The short answer is that's the idea, but we don't lose the ability to work weekends. So we still have the ability to work any day of the week we want. We just no longer have the ability to run 7 days. So to drop down to basically, we're saying that if there's nothing scheduled, nothing planned, we don't know of any fishing competitions, we don't know of any weather events, we'll be working Monday to Friday. If there's anything other than that, we'll schedule ourselves to be off in the week and work a weekend. There's no problem with that at all. We've already got several weekends planned to be worked. There's no real change in how we'd operate in winter anyway.
I think that, or maybe there's a couple of them, because it's only 5 or 6. And so, and I also get the, I guess the responsibility we feel to respond to emergencies compared to being on call. So you mentioned, the challenge of being on call. So what is exactly our role in terms of the harbour master? Are we expected to attend? I get if we're on the water, we'd be obliged to attend, but are we expected to be a first response, or is that Coast Guard's role? I'm just trying to understand if we're already not doing education and visible on a Saturday and Sunday, but we have an on-call roster. I'm confused but what is our role? What are we obliged to do if we're not on the water and the call for help goes out?
So from a sort of legislatively requirement and looking at just the role of the harbour master, there's not actually anything that says you've got to be on the water at all.
Okay.
And we don't have to do any response. The harbour master's position is not a response agency. However, to be there for our community is obviously quite an important thing. We have other obligations to be on the water through the summer for Able Tasman offshore work and patrolling. And I think there's a lot to be said for continuing to be on the water and have a presence. And obviously we need to be on the water to do the navigation aids, which is a requirement. So we may as well be doing both things. In terms of an emergency response, we have a few agreements sort of out there, unofficial agreements, I suppose, particularly with the likes of FENS for moving gear if there was an emergency. And I'm trying to sort of broaden the scope of that, I guess, to be a bit more formalised and a written agreement. And then with RCC New Zealand and SARS, there is a network already around where when there is anything happening in our region, they contact me straight away. And it's up to us whether we can or can't respond. And a lot of those responses are always cost recoverable as well. So provided we have a vessel and people, we'll always go.
Thanks, Pete.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, through Chair. Thanks, Kate, for a very good report. I do want to acknowledge that, you have been down on FTEs. You've had incredibly busy summer, and from the report, somebody created a very good roster to have coverage. So I wanted to acknowledge all those things first. Obviously, Councillor Murray has covered a few of the points around safety that I had made notes to ask you on. Partway through your conversation or response, something that Councillor Butler shared, you said the words providing I can do. Is your providing I can do based on FTEs, resources, funds? What is the providing I can do catch?
That's what was that in relation to like an out of hours. Yeah, so it's more about whether I'm actually looking after my daughter and have somebody else that I can actually drop everything that I'm personally doing to go down and then do it. It's not really. The scenario in there, we talked about an emergency response for someone getting washed out of the Motueka River. That was on a Sunday. I think I actually saw you at the Motueka Market that day. And I happened to be there with my maritime officer. At the time, we were just having a coffee in the corner and we had our kids with us, and I just turned to him and said, I think we've got to go. And gave the keys to my wife, and we jumped in the ute and went. It was just a pure fluke that we were both sitting there and could respond so quickly. So it's less around, I'm not looking at hours of work and things like that. It's more around physically, can we be there? Can I drop everything and go?
So acknowledge your flexibility and the personal cost that comes, because you are correct. I didn't see you. I think the only other question that I wanted to kind of banter around is for you to broaden your scope so that that incident down at the Mott River, what other funding could we potentially tap into if you feel that that's an area that we need to be doing some more coverage in? Because we've sat here and we've discussed about the Sentinel, and unfortunately that hadn't been signalled well about the work that needs doing. And I guess as councillors, we often hear that we have to sweat the asset, but that's going to come at a much bigger cost. So if you're wanting to change the scope of being a first responder for things like the river event, what other funding is there out there that potentially we could be looking at? Not me, you.
So I'd actually rather push it the other way. I think we should be looking at consolidating the harbour master's function as a work boat to do the job on the water, not necessarily the emergency response work. And I think we should be looking at how we can actually support Coast Guard to be a presence in Tasman and Golden Bay more than they have been in the past. Coast Guard got funding through the government. I think they got 64 million in last year's budget. So I think we should be looking more at their role than how we could do their job. I think we're not a response. We don't have the capabilities. I don't have the manpower. I don't think we should be gearing up for that. Having said that, if something happens in our region and I am available, we want to be able to still go.
Thank you. Councillor Butler, then Councillor Ellis and Deputy Mayor Brock.
I'm happy to move the report. This question was just about, and I don't want to put you under any pressure or anything, but about oil spill kits. And am I right in that this is a national decision as to where they're located? You know, there's an ongoing issue about Port Tarakoe not having an oil spill kit. And there is, I think their nearest one is Motueka. No. Okay, so could you just cover off, please, where we're at with that? I know that it is an issue for Port Tarakoe with their increasing recreational boat traffic, and yep.
So yeah, all the gear is owned nationally. So it's all owned by Maritime New Zealand, and it's all funded through the Oil Pollution Fund. It's all put in strategic locations around the country of the greatest risk. So all of Nelson Tasman's gear is currently stored in Port Nelson. There is options around looking at moving that elsewhere. However, if you were to move it or split it up, you then have to have all the resources that go with it. A team of 1 or 2 is not going to be able to deploy this gear. You know, we have a team of 20 that train to deploy the gear. So keeping the gear in Tarakoe doesn't necessarily mean you can deploy it any faster than if the gear was to come from somewhere else. That being said, I do want to explore other options for other gear that can be deployed easily and quickly. The other issue with Tarakoe is that there is a tier 1 site that is, although it's on council land, the site is a tier 1 site, so it is a fuel transfer site. So it's where fuel is taken from the wharf or from the shore to a vessel. So there's a fuel bowser that's owned by MPD. So whoever owns that tier 1 site has the obligation to provide spill kit for a maximum credible spill from that site, not council and not Maritime New Zealand. So it's a case of working through that auditing process to ensure they have the appropriate gear for that site. So there's 2 different arguments there as to whether it should come from NPD or whether it's national gear or whether council should be looking at buying some of its own gear. A lot of marinas around the country will have their own spill gear. So it's sort of
I
work in
understand
progress.
with NPD that's in process, and it's going to happen. So yeah, I just think we need to be keeping on talking about this because it's been it's been on the table for a long time, and I'd hate us to have an incident where we then end up saying, oh, we should have arranged something. So it's good news to hear that that is an active thing that you're working on, and we'll look forward to hearing what some options might be.
And I think now that we've got Kay in the dual role now as well, there'll be a lot more emphasis on this sort of planning around where the gear is kept and how it goes. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Ellis.
Oh, thank you. Hopefully just a quick question. Appreciate the comprehensive questions and answers that have gone on before. I just want a quick question about 4.8 and the registrations and the marking of vessels under the new bylaw. There's a comment that no infringements have been issued and we're providing one with time to comply. Which is excellent. I'm really supportive of that. Do we have a timeline when we're going to start ensuring compliance with this issue? And I would imagine it's within time for the next summer season, but can I just have some confirmation around that?
So ideally, we'd be looking at starting more of an enforcement thing, and obviously working through with the VADE model and the policies that council put forward, or that Shane put forward to council. Yeah, we'll still follow that same enforcement policy. However, I wouldn't be looking to do infringements unless it was a severe risk against the Maritime Transport Act, probably until next Christmas. So this coming Christmas, should I say. Having said that, we've still got a fair bit of work to do to get that get that infringement schedule through the ministry before we can actually issue them anyway.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Bryant?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Peter, just have some comments and accolades first, and then some questions just around people like Councillor Murray, 2 or 3, maybe 4 questions. So firstly, thank you for all the events and you've attended through the summer season and on the fringes. That's really good public liaison, and the benefits seen well beyond the days. It's great that you're doing that sort of work, educating the community, so well done. The next question relates, and comments relates to the Lake Rohiriri powerboat incident, where we had the boat run ashore. The community up there were very supportive and grateful for this assistance you did provide on the day and afterwards, so that's really appreciated. The report says it ran out of the lake at 100 miles per hour. Is that right, or is that an error? Because I would have thought you'd have put it in knots for one thing, but at 100 miles per hour, it could have been a real disaster.
So the skipper on the day basically said that he was doing 100 mile at the corner. So what speed he was doing at the shore, I don't know. And
it was incredibly lucky he didn't hit anyone or anything substantial. So it's what's the odds of that? Is that just a fluke incident, or is that common or unlikely?
I mean, it's never happened there. I think it was 102 years or something they've been running that event. So you know, there's a fair amount of evidence to say it's not common. Having said that, it has happened in numerous places around the country in the past where you know, rudders or props have fallen off and the boat does keep going because it is basically traveling on a cushion of air like an airplane wing. So they are very hard to slow down.
Yeah, so thanks very much for your support, and that you've provided to the people concerned. And then lastly, just in relation to the Centennial, that boat is probably getting towards 10 years or old or beyond, if my memory serves me correctly. And it's started to show some of its limitations from the report. Have you got a sort of programmed timeline for a look at a replacement? And because there has been some limitations on that boat over the time we've had it around, particularly the ability to be able to tow it up to the lake, for example, and things like that. So just wondered if you had any comments, thoughts on that, and you're working towards replacement and what with?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to be talking about that a lot more. I think it's something we need to address. And now that we do have Pacaya, I think there's a lot more options available to us for a more suitable vessel in the future. And then I think we also need to look at what maintenance costs Sentinel will be needing over the next few years as to what is actually the cheaper solution in the long term. I can't say too much more in terms of where we should be going with that and whether that's something you guys want to be involved in terms of whether we'd like to have a workshop or a presentation on what other regions are looking at doing in the future, or what options we could be putting forward in terms of with a vessel. That's something we could look at if that's of interest. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess that's all very for the next long-term plan or working towards that. So leave it in your and Tim's capable hands. Currently. Right. So that's all going to be reaffirmed. Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Kinnamonts.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. You caught me. Peter, I also got to compliment you on what you do, like Stuart Bryan said, getting out there in the public, getting in there, not their faces, but being seen is huge. And once, you know, you've been on there, and I just can't thank you much for what you do there, because it's not an 8 to 5 job. It's public holidays, Christmas Day, Anzac Day. I don't know whether you went out Anzac Day, but it's all right in there. But you're also working in with the harbour master from Nelson, and I believe that's quite a close relationship. Well, not that close, but you ring him up and say, "Can you go?" as opposed to me go. Would that be a fair enough comment?
I mean, we talk regularly. We currently don't have any MOUs or cross warranting, but that's an area that we've got in works in progress. To have an MOU and cross warranting around so that we could actually cover each other off, either in emergencies or extended leave, or something happened, to one of us. Could be something takes us out of the country for a while or into hospital, but so there's redundancies for both sides. So that's a piece of work that is currently been drafted up, and we're still waiting or working through it. But yeah.
Has that got any priority at all? I'm thinking of resources combining, helping one another out, as opposed to one in Nelson and one in Tasman. So is there any priority to an MOU established?
There is. I don't think it'll have quite as much sharing resources as you would assume. The regions are very different from a water perspective. Nelson do deal with a lot more larger shipping. They do have a lot more. They have a lot of recreational vessels as well, but they're very much in one area. Whereas for us, it's a lot more broad spread. So we'll spend a lot of our time doing massive distance to travel, to talk to the same number of people that they can talk to in one afternoon. So they're very different areas. So although we can work together an awful lot, and typically over in, for example, for them to get to Mapua is really quick. It's probably just as quick from Mott as it is from Nelson. So they can certainly support us a lot with Mapua and Rabbit Island and Blind Channel and things like that. But once you get further up, they're not going to have as much capability as we have anyway. So it's more of a backup than a resource we can use all the time.
Okay, thank you. I've got 2 more questions if you persevere with me. Page 42, clause 6.2 and 6.3. You talk about the fire call out on the small island opposite Mapua Channel and Bullivant Island there. And good on you for working through the issue with FENZ. So what's the Mapua one? Are they still reliant on the harbour master attending if there's a fire over there? Or are they able to use an alternate vessel to get over?
I mean, essentially that would be a FENZ decision to be made. However, we've basically offered to say, look, when there's a call out, call us first, and we'll always try and be there as quick as we can and work through with them. It's a lot safer than any other option, but essentially it's a FENZ decision.
Okay.
And I don't want to comment on that, but certainly nationally, there's a lot of work going in with FENZ and harbour masters around the whole country. So I sort of expect to see a bit more about that after the national meeting in a couple of weeks' time.
And last question, page 43, clause 7.1.4. You talk about Sentinel doing the navigation aid work, and that it's taking a high toll on the vessel, pushing it to the limits. Can you describe me how that pushing it to the limits? Like, are you picking up the navigation aids and you haven't got enough room on Sentinel, or I don't know? Can you just? I'm a bit at a loss what the limits are.
So I'm thinking more around we're lifting heavy loads with the davit. You can see a certain amount of fatigue already appearing around that davit and how it's used. Also, when you're operating with loads hanging from, okay, it's not very high height, but the load isn't, once you picked it off the seabed, the load isn't on the seabed anymore. It's, above your head. And then if you're in weather conditions as well, you've got to take that into account. So our operating window when we're using that davit is a lot smaller than we would like. We're having to stop work and jobs are taking us 4 or 5 times as long as they could do because of those limitations.
But didn't Dan Kenny build a barge, a lifting type thing to carry his boys on, and a davit on that was purpose built?
Yep, so we do still have, they're named Thor. The barge isn't in survey. So in terms of using it for lifting, I would think we're opening ourselves up to quite large liabilities for using it for that purpose. In terms of using it for towing floats around, sure, but we will burn 4 times as much fuel towing it around, and it would be cheaper just to pay a contractor than it would be to do that. Currently, the guys are out there picking up floats in Anchorage on a barge, so we do still contract the bulk of the work anyway. Or that's something I'd like to bring in-house if we had the chance.
Thank you. It'll be very good, won't it, when the time comes to be working out what's needed and why, and so that whenever whoever's going to be here to make the decision about what's required will be highly informed folk. Will be very good. Councillor Dowler, and then we're going to put the resolution.
Madam Chair, just a couple of comments if that's okay. One, in a clock back about 10 years, I was part of the couple of people in the room that went and got the Sentinel sorted, I suppose, right back when it was looking at buying it. So there was no one in this room here, I think it was even around those days, except for probably Kit and Stuart, yeah. But anyway, I ended up having a good discussion with our local boat supplier in Watawaka who had been asked to quote. And one of the things I suggested doing quite strongly after my experience running a branch of a major business in South Island was to offer a service contract. And the idea of the service contract was to lock in costs for so many years or so many hours of the boat, which would guarantee each service would be a fixed amount. And plus they would have a window of predicting upcoming work that needed to be funded, etc., etc. The boat wasn't bought through the local company, and where the boat was bought from, they never offered anything like that. So I think that's probably one of the reasons why we've ended up where we are. So I'd strongly suggest that in the future, no matter what we buy, you head down that track, because I was in the earth moving game, and when we were putting out service contracts and pre-maintenance warnings, we're probably saving those customers $10,000 to $15,000 per annum. It was easy to do. It was just part of the deal. So I strongly recommend that. My other comment is, read in the paper about the rescue of the 2 guys out of the tree. Tasman Harbour Master, Nelson Harbour Master, and the Coast Guard turned up to do it. Fine, that happened on the day. It reminded me of last year when a wheel fell off at the clock tower corner of a car going around. It was a drag racing day, and we had a fire engine at the drag racing. Next thing, the lights were on and it was gone. Come back, I went over and had a chat with them. I said, "Oh, that was quick and exciting. You're only away for about 3/4 of an hour. The drag racing had to stop because there was no fire appliance on site." "Yeah, a wheel fell off a car, mate. There was us, another fire engine, and an ambulance attended." That's how ridiculous the responses are when someone rings 111 and says a wheel's fallen off a car at the clock tower corner. They send everybody, including 2 fire engines. So I hope that doesn't happen in the future. That's all I'm worried about. It's like mold growing on a rock. It just gets bigger and bigger.
Thank you.
Just make a quick comment there if I can.
About the car on the wheel, or
so the decision to respond to that is left up to the police SARS team, and the report was there was 2 people in the water, essentially swimming. So yeah, it was a case of get there as quick as we can. Yeah.
Thanks, Peter. I could understand the process there. And just before I put the resolution, received the report, community engagement and education is fantastic, isn't it? And I don't quite know what we can do to get people to read signs. You know, I spent a lot of time at Tata Beach, and we've got a 5 knot area now that goes out around the. A lot of people don't know what 5 knots is either, and I just restrain myself quite a lot. I want to yell at them on their jet skis. 5 knots. You know, but that whole area around the islands and the headland, it's 5 knots, and you know, a jet ski screaming through one of these big, powerful things. They just seem like someone would kill themselves if they fell off. But hooning through there, and I had a wee chat to his dad just because I happened to be in his workplace, and said, "Oh look, I see the kids are having a great time, and they seem to not realise it's 5 knots, and they just had no idea." We've got a huge sign there at the boat ramp. Look, it's big as that, I'd say, maybe bigger. With a very, very clear outline. So there's something there, isn't there, around people rocking up, just don't read the signs, or maybe they're locals for a long, long time and don't think something's changed, or I'm not sure, but I don't quite know how you overcome that other than a relentless pursuit of education, which is what you are doing. Thanks for indulging my little jet ski story.
I know if it comes to Jamie Thompson Road.
Oh yes, yeah, no speed bumps. So I've got to move. I think Councillor Butler, you moved, and Councillor Maru, happy to second. Put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you very much, Peter. All right, Deputy Mayor thinks it's a great idea to have a very quick cup of tea. So let's go 10 minutes and come back in. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome, Shane. Shannon, Deidre, over to you.
Kia ora, Madam Chair and councillors. I've invited Shannon and Deirdre to accompany me to the table to assist with any questions that may come out of the report. And I think that the report has been read and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much for the traffic light system. It's going to be great. I just wondered, we did actually have a discussion at the Golden Bay Community Board about placement, like exact placement of signs, and whether or not you would be willing to have input from locals as to exact placements of signs, because sometimes it can make a lot of difference, just a few meters can make a lot of difference as to whether or not something's workable. And one of the places that we discussed at the community board was actually just by the Collingwood Roost, the sign that's going to protect Collingwood Roost, and that there is actually a short stretch of beach there, just where the Aorere River comes out, which is not the Roost, but it is a fishing place. And if the sign could go, just allow for a short distance of fishing there, then that would, instead of being actually directly on the edge of the campground, that would actually be, I think, would solve a lot of potential friction and would not actually put the Collingwood Roost at risk, because that's a little around the corner. Oh, sorry.
Through you, Madam Chair, we're more than happy to suggestions and guidance from locals on where the best suited locations for signs to be erected are. We do have some places where we will be putting signs. We know they will work, like for instance at Rototai, we've already got signs erected. We intend to continue to do that. But in new locations where prohibitions have been extended or
new prohibitions, your guidance is always much appreciated.
So how would you like that process to happen? Would that be through the community board or input?
Probably through Madam Chair, the direct input to us at the team that we'll be directing it. So service requests to the regulatory department be the best way to go.
I imagine a draft process will be helpful in the draft. What's sort of being proposed? If that, I think it's helpful if that's looked at before it's enacted, just in case something gets missed. We'll just have those incidents. I won't repeat it, but signs that actually don't make a lot of sense in some ways. So I think the point at which local people, like the board or whoever, you can just check in about what's been proposed and ensure that none of those little anomalies happen, like local anomalies. Thank you. Councillor.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thanks for the report, Shane. Always so clear and simple for me to read, which is always a bonus. I just want to say the examples of the signs to go for the dog control areas. Councillor Hill's already mentioned about how people don't read signs, and so I'm really pleased to see such a simple, very clear traffic light system in use. I think that's an excellent movement forward. I struggle often trying to work out if I can walk my dog in places. So for a brain like mine, they're perfect. So I appreciate the work that's being done on that. I've just got a couple of quick questions, hopefully, for clarification. Just got to scroll through my notes. With the food safety levy rates, 5.4, I see that we're collecting on behalf of the government a levy. Do we receive some sort of administration fee for that? It looks like another point of business where we're having to do a central government role for them.
Through the chair, yes, it's another way of council taking a little bit of a bashing through MPI's levy, but we can collect up to $11 per invoice. My suggestion is we collect all $11 because that works out to be about 4.5 minutes of, let's say, my time. So it's certainly not going to cover the cost of collecting the fee, but that's all we can charge up to. So $11 per invoice.
Because that was my next point. Are we actually covering our own costs? And that's looking like we're not. Oh joy. And we've got the new alcohol ban pavement signage being trialled. I'd just like to check that we're checking in with those in the accessibility area to check that they are effective and not creating some sort of hazard.
Through the chair, so this is a system that we've literally just brought in. It's a decal, so it's a sticker. So it's not a risk. It's not it's a lot smaller than the spray signs that have been there to date. It's a much cheaper option. We don't require anybody to get trained to put them on. Very aware that if we get possibly 6 months out of each sticker is probably all we're going to do in a heavily trafficked area. We put one down just as a trial by Richmond day and night. It's still down there, but it's not heavily trafficked. So my guess would be probably 6 months and in a heavily trafficked area, but it's only a decal, can be easily removed. Again, talking about, if anybody from the committee wanted to, put a sticker somewhere, it's easy to hand them the sticker and say, this is how you do it. It may not work, but at the moment, with just the cost restrictions, we thought it was a system that we just quite like to trial. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. And finally, I'm just feeling a little frustrated around the whole dog control issue. We operate on a closed account, and the idea is that those that are using the services are paying for it. But I'm seeing that a lot of the things that my assumption is a lot of the things that we're called out to I've seen through the hearings on the Animal Sub-Control Committee that it's issues with dogs that aren't registered. And I'm just curious as to how we are recovering the costs from those people that are causing, I don't know what the percentage is of unregistered dogs that are causing issues in the community. How are we recover? What options are available to us to recover costs from those that aren't registering the dogs, other than getting them to register after the event?
Through you, Madam Chair. If they're known about before the event, so they're a recorded unregistered dog, where if the dog remains unregistered, we do send infringements out. There's a $300 failure to register infringements, and they then go to Ministry of Justice for collection if they remain unpaid as well. Outside of that, we also do like visits to properties of known unregistered dogs. The rangers will go, they'll visit the property, see if the dogs are still there, update records and register the dogs on site with the owner if they're there. And we do make multiple phone calls and stuff. If the dog isn't known about until the incident, we'll go through similar steps post-incident, requiring registration and microchipping, potential impoundment. There's some actions there, but there's not a lot for non-known about unregistered dogs.
Okay, as a whole, but thank you. I appreciate the explanation.
Thank you. Councillor McKenzie and then Deputy Mayor Bryant.
Thank you through the chair. Just a couple of questions. I'm just reading in the report that there's been a decrease in illegal dumping, and when I read that, I mean, honestly, I feel as though I've read in a different council report that there's been an increase in illegal dumping, and I'm thinking, what is it? So I think it's all resonating around here that we've read in another report that there's been an increase. So is it on the downwards or is it on the upwards?
Through the chair. The statistics that we provide is based on the COVID cameras that we use, Councillor. And that is report over the last period, and the comparable period relates to that. Overall, throughout the district, that would probably be in the reports that you referred to, but this was just what we're responsible for.
Okay, I mean, I think I get that, but maybe if there could just be sort of some cross-working across the council with people who are reporting. I mean, David was here earlier, but so that we get a whole of a council view about what's actually going on. Anyway, I don't need to labour the point. And then I'm just curious to know, in terms of our parking infringements, why, for example, 20% of parking infringements, so they're obviously issued and then they're cancelled. So why would 20% be cancelled?
Sorry, Madam Chair. It's issuing errors as well as accepted as reasonings. So in a lot of instances, we'll issue an infringement for parking in a disabled car park without a permit. Those people may come back to us and have a permit. It just may not have been on display, or it wasn't on display where we were looking. That we will waive that because it's a $750 fine. That person was allowed to park there legally. So items like that. Others are errors. We're trying to review each infringement error and see where we can learn from that to reduce those errors and reduction in cancelled tickets. But most of the time it is explanations that we accept or issuing errors.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, well, yeah, I'm pleased to hear that you are looking into it. It would just seem for 20% sort of begs the question about why are they being issued in the first place. It seems high, but yeah, I accept your explanation.
Thanks. Deputy Mayor Bryant and then Councillor Cheryl Press.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one question from me, or maybe two, relating to the report, and thank you for the report. Just in relation to the liquor licences, and there's a backlog of 15 for renewal. What effect is that having on those businesses? Are they still able to operate, and is that affecting new applications as well? And what's caused this delay? Is it a bulge of applications coming through, or just wondered what the reason?
So through the chair, yeah, thank you for your question. The backlog at the moment, we like environmental health cover a massive range of food, noise, alcohol, public health nuisances, and we operate on a staff of 2 3/4. So in terms of getting to all of these, and up until recently, we had two officers. So we were basically doing the best we could with what we have. The recent staff member that we've taken on will cover food verifications and alcohol. So already we're starting to catch up in that area. In terms of what implications does this have on premises waiting? Once you submit your application, your alcohol application, your current license is okay until we get there. Yeah. In some respects, we're waiting for applicants to come back with further information, or but it doesn't.
And is it affecting new applications at all?
No. We always keep on top of the new ones. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Shellcrest, and then Councillors Walker, Kinnemont, Maru, Daiki, Dowler, and anyone else who's here.
Yep, through the chair. Hey, I've got a comment and a question. Love the traffic light system. That was something that definitely came through in the dog bylaw process, the signage. As a dog owner, I think it's really good as well. My question is, just what size roughly are those signs going to be?
Through Madam Chair, they're A4, and they have the QR code on them that you can see there. That QR code leads to our website where we've got a live map where you can see everything and your GPS location as well. But they are A4, so we can erect them on site easily without having to look for 2 posts or whatever else we may require.
Yeah, thank you. I suppose it's a balance between too small and too big, isn't it? The intrusiveness. So they're all going to be the same size, so no big ones or smaller ones.
Through Madam Chair, we do have some that are double. So there's prohibited this way, under control this way. Those will be twice the size.
Is it correct that they've been printed?
Yes, it is. They're at the pound, being erected simultaneously.
Thank you. That's all.
Thank you.
Councillor Walker.
Thank you, through Madam Chair. I have 3 questions, if I may. The first one is around your health and safety incidents, number 10. It's quite alarming to see the number of occasions where our staff have been abused. I guess I'm wanting to know, has that increased from our last report? Because it doesn't give me a variance between previous to this current report. Secondly, I guess I need to note that, none of us are immune from this. But I guess for me, it's like, what are we doing to mitigate that risk for our staff? Because I, consciously aware that in my community that we have a team of people, and that team is growing in numbers, that are no longer able to interact because of frustration levels on multiple reasons, and they're now at a place of reacting. And I don't see that dying down or going away any day soon. So I'm just wondering, what are we doing to mitigate and keeping the staff, frontline staff who obviously get this, safe?
Through the chair. The first question, I believe the numbers are similar to the last report. I think the last one was 6, and this one is about 5 now. 11, sorry. Sorry, it's gone up since the last one. My apologies. What we are doing in regard to that, we're actively encouraging our staff to firstly report. We're working with the police to investigate all incidents that are appropriately passed on to them. We're also working with our health and safety team to look at lone workers and any other systems that we can put in place to provide a safer environment. Some of the issues that have been raised relate to the use of body cam footage, which is a good deterrent in most instances, and our staff are encouraged to press the record button whenever they are having an incident or a conversation with someone in the community. We don't know when it's going to escalate, so we've got the backup, and that is proven in a few cases to have deterred people from escalating their level of intent towards the officer.
Thank you.
If I could just add to that, one of the things I want to reassure councillors is every single incident that is reported on the system comes through to ELT. So ELT get to know exactly what's going on and exactly the mitigations that have been put in place on each and every incident, because the health and safety culture, I think, starts in the front line and comes all the way through. So just want to reinforce that all of these issues are taken quite seriously across the council.
And I presume that ELT then look at what was the trigger potentially, or the final straw that triggered the behaviour from the person not managing their own ability to interact as opposed to react. So my next one is, first of all, I wanted to ask around, so this afternoon we have a freedom camping bylaw review workshop, and then today's stats we have some information. Can you tell me how many infringements get paid? Is there a percentage rate of infringements notices that we give that end up being a financial transaction that happens?
Through Madam Chair, I don't actually have that number in front of me, but it isn't very high. A lot of the people we're infringing are travellers. They might not be locals. They're gone out of the country before that moves to MOJ, because it's a statutory obligation that will give them 28 days and another 28 days before it moves on. But the ones that are paid, they can be quite a long time before they're paid, because it might go to MOJ and it's sort of deducted. So the recovery is not that high, which I'll also speak to this afternoon as well, I believe.
Okay, thank you. And the last thing I wanted to comment on was number 16, which is our homelessness. And Shane, I want to thank you for the engagement that you and I have had in the conversations. And it's probably worth the councillors around the table being aware that when our officers are out there and they observe somebody that's homeless, if they're given consent, they're able to get a referral to some social service networks out there. And I'm quite keen to hear not names or anything, but how regularly we are finding incidents where people aren't freedom camping and for whatever reason have ended up living in a vehicle.
I'll just bring the spreadsheet up, councillor, if you give me a minute. My apologies, councillor. Can you just repeat the question again?
Is it a different number than what's reported in the report? Is there something different you're looking for?
No, I just think it's helpful for us when we're talking about like the bylaw for freedom camping, and there's other topics that come through on different committees when it comes to housing. And it's great that we hear, but I mean, what's in this report today doesn't say that you're doing referrals, but I know we're doing referrals because you and I have had these conversations. And I'm mindful that in my role in the community that I hear a lot about homelessness. I mean, that's probably my past, and the fact that, it's a reoccurring occurrence for our community to have people. And it's good for us to note that, yes, we notice them. We're not doing infringement notices. We're not pushing them on per se, but if the actual person is looking for some support, that our staff actually are doing referrals to social services to get some support. So is that we've seen, like, we have a social conscience. Some of our community don't see it or understand it. But here's an example where we do have one, and I'd quite like that added to the report so people know our infringement officers don't go out there and go, oh, here's a homeless person, we're not going to do anything. Because actually we do. And I just like it included because I've had that conversation, but I don't know how many people around this table would know that that actually happens as part of our normal process, finding somebody who, for whatever reason, has ended up in a vehicle.
Yeah.
Through the chair, I think that's a good point, councillor, and I'll definitely include it in the next one. Thank you.
I've understood that that's how things go, just through the conversations we've had at various committees, and so looking for the report to reflect what's happening. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Kinnemont and then Councillor Maru.
Thank you, through Madam Chair. Page 48, clause 6.6, about these stickers go on the footpath for the alcohol ban. Having seen some stickers that come off the path and footpaths in Mapua with the streets for people thing, have you discussed these stickers with the Jamie McPherson's traffic engineers? Because their ones didn't last more than a few weeks, so hopefully they're a different sort of sticker or a different sort of glue than what they've been using. So can I ask, firstly, have you discussed or talked to Jamie McPherson about these stickers? And if not, could you please make sure that what you're using are not the same ones he's used?
Yeah. Through the chair, yeah, I certainly will. We actually haven't spoken to Jamie. What the feedback I was getting from from sources were that the ones that we're using at the moment, they're ugly, they're big, they're incredibly labor intensive, so for the idea due to just resource constraints on us at the moment, the most resourceful way for us to manage it is maybe getting a student during the summertime to put these stickers on. For them to do that in terms of the spray painting, we have to get them trained up with NZ, with the roading, Paulton Hogan, get them a vehicle. There's a whole lot of things that we have to do that we don't with the stickers. So it really is just a trial. As I said, we'll give it a go this summer. It may be, may fall flat on its face. It's a very cheap resort. It's a very cheap way of doing it, but we'll certainly look at it next year when hopefully we've had a little bit of feedback. Yeah, but thanks for your feedback. Yeah, that's very good.
Thank you, Councillor Maru, and then Councillor Dakey and Councillor Dowler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 8.4, I don't know whether, is there anything you can add? Like, has there been consensus reached between the Nelson Waimea Clay Target Club at Golden Downs and I guess I'm just looking for, has there been consensus, not the detail? I know we didn't have any public forum, so I'm expecting.
Okay, through the chair. Yes, I was wondering if this was going to be raised. So we recently had a meeting with all three parties. That's the first time all three parties have been in the same room. It actually went very, very well. It was very, very positive. Am I allowed to say where we're going with it?
I'm not sure, but
I don't know.
Are you nearing reaching consensus is probably enough.
We're working towards it. We're certainly working towards it, and it's probably been a lot more positive than we probably anticipated. So
I think Deputy Bright will catch up with Kim offline. And the only other thing, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the service of Mr. Lewis as a district licensing committee member who stepped down, and we've welcomed two others that would have been to this committee, but David has a long history and experience in liquor licensing as a previous staff member here as well. So that's all I've got.
Thank you. Councillor Dakey.
Thank you, through the chair. Councillor Kinnemont stole my thunder. It was just going to be around those stickers. Yeah, we had heard a lot of good feedback about them until they went down and they didn't last and they ended up blowing around. And the challenge with those was bike ties. Kids love pulling wheelies on them. They'd ride up to them and slam on the brakes and rip them up and stuff like that. So, like Councillor Kinnemont said, please talk to the transport team, and it might be something where there's another activity happening out there and you can share a service and get them put down via another contractor or something. So I think there is something to pursue there because it was a nightmare. So Yeah, thank you.
Just through the chair on that one is we did have discussions with engineering and roading, and the cost of us to do it is just huge compared to laying down a few stickers. So I thought we'd trial the stickers first. You know, again, within environmental health, we're a little bit limited with with my staff in terms of how we can get signage up, and yeah, it's a bit of a tricky one for us, but yeah, we'll see how the end of the summer goes.
Through the chair, just to further expand on that, we also have the option to put the stickers on street furniture, so i.e. a rubbish bin or something, if it does get used or damaged easily. Also with there's no cost to put a traffic management plan in place to do all the painting, so a lot of benefits in that space.
Thank you. Good, you've got the lowdown on what young people are doing on their bikes. Right. Councillor Dowler.
Thanks, Madam
And
Chair.
looking for a move in.
I'm happy to move. I have one question and one comment. To do a 4.2, the new function of the enforcement people. I went down to Dix Reserve last week, and I went through there to buy a cup of coffee at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I was quite disgusted to see 14 Freedom campers sitting there cooking breakfast and doing all sorts of stuff. They're supposed to be off that site by 7. Now, the previous contractor, I understand, used to have someone go through there and knock on the door and tell them that they were supposed to be gone by around about 8 o'clock. If they weren't gone when he came back, whether he ever went back or not, I don't know, he'd give an infringement notice. So I'm just wondering whether, whenever we do have a parking warden working over there, whatever time they start, could they do a walkthrough and tell these people to get out of there? They'll be back in 10 minutes. If they don't get it, they'll get an infringement. Because some of the stuff that they were cooking was pretty bad. I tell you, the stench was horrible for their breakfast. And I don't think normal people should have to put up with that at that time of the morning. And it was concerning to see 14 of them. Bugging me days, I had a look at our email at the cut tea time, and Claire Hutt has put a email through today about the Freedom Campers in Dix Reserve for the workshop this afternoon, and is basically saying what I've just said from several businesses. So it's something that I think the sign says quite plainly, gone by 7 a.m, 6 a.m. on a Sunday to clear the market. So yeah, if that could be followed up just somehow, I don't know how. I'll leave it to the experts at the table to work it out, but I do think it needs to be tied up a little bit. I think once weed gets round again, it should hopefully clear itself up. Number 2 on the comment, Brett beat me to it, 8.4. I'm a great stickler of something that's been there for 50 years, shouldn't get beaten up by one person. So Western Springs in Auckland's a great example. We've lost a speedway up there due to a couple of neighbours complaining. I hope, like heck, it doesn't turn out to be the same down here for our gun clubs.
We just got to be a little careful about what we're thinking of as being normal people. Because people might be looking at us around the room here and thinking, I'm not sure about the normality sometimes. But you might want to respond, Shane, just around what does happen around the checking on Dix Reserve in terms of compliance.
Through the chair, no defence been made. I'm surprised to get that feedback, because we do have a Freedom Camping officer working every day for that area, and he's got a set route that he does, Alexander Bluff, etc. So no excuses. I will follow up on that.
I'll send you the email.
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Is someone happy to second the report? Councillor Shellcrest. If there's nothing further, I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you very much. Rob and Mike, welcome.
Kia ora tātou, rangatira mā. I'd like to introduce Mike to you. So Mike's been with us, how long now, Mike? Since November. Oh, it's a bit embarrassing. I haven't introduced him before now. So if you look at Mike and you think Martin Doyle with a few extra skills, so Mike used to have some very similar role to Martin Doyle over in Marlborough and has spent time in Greater Wellington, and then more recently has been working for Ministry for the Environment, and is particularly for the hydrological community been really important at looking at data management across the country and trying to coordinate or corral people's enthusiasm for different systems so we can get a consistent approach to data. So that made Mike particularly attractive to Tasman as we're moving into this data forward approach. And you will have noticed, hopefully, particularly in the last 6 months, but it's a snowballing effect that we're pushing more and more data out. So you'll hear people talking about the Geo Hub. Alistair might mention it later. We've got the farm planning going online. We've got Mike talking about some of the advances that have occurred in the website. So this is us really pushing out, and this is one of Mike's specialties. Mike is fixed term for us, so it's one of those roles that we will discuss again in the short term. So Mike looks after the environmental data and environmental monitoring teams. Some of you will know Mike's partner, who's very well known across the Te Taihu, and I'll let Mike introduce himself. That's okay.
Yeah, through the chair. Thanks for the very humbling introduction, Rob. For those that may know my wife and Iwi Circle, she's a trustee for Te Atiawa across Te Tauihu. That's Vanessa Eade. So yeah, that's right from the local community. Really entrenched in Waikawa Bay. Sorry, so. Yeah, a little bit hard. So I do come across and commute each week to join Tasman District Council here. So I'll take my report as read, and I'd just like to highlight, the focus of the group at the moment is around two areas: is building some more resilience into the network, and that's the network from the remote monitoring sites all the way out to data delivery. And then also the other area of focus that the team are working hard on is increasing the amount of data that we're actually pushing out and making available to people real time, or access for the user to access directly rather than coming to the front door and asking sort of approach. Some of that's resilient stuff is going pretty good. In terms of the highlight for us was actually watching the website perform during the recent flood events in April and actually stand up and deliver the data to users. Well, I understand in the past it's been a point of failure, so it's great to see success and see that functioning and doing what it needs to do. We've also got the closure of the 3G network that affects some of the remote monitoring sites, and that work's underway to be completed by the due date when that network's turned off by the providers. And then also we're sort of hanging our hopes. We've put in a funding bid to Kanoa to accelerate probably the enhancement of the monitoring site. So that's a $500,000 bid we've got, and hoping to get an answer quickly through, which is, it's one of those joint funded things. Yeah, we can build and maintain our network and keep it resilient, but funds are limited and it's pushed, and that will hopefully put the accelerator down so we can do it in a more timely manner. So yeah, other than that, I'm quite happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mike. Did you say Kanoa is where
Yes,
we
correct,
applied to? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Very good to have you with us and to be introduced properly. Thank you. Questions or comments? This side of the room, I see Councillor Dowler and then Councillor Butler, Councillor McKenzie.
You're welcome. Just about the 3G network and stuff like that. I just went to Aussie a couple of weeks ago and took my modern 2016 cell phone with me after I contacted Spark to make sure it would work in Australia under their new 4G network. And they said, yep, should be good. Well, it wasn't. My phone was too old, and you've got to have a Volt phone, which is apparently the modern technology now for 4G. So I had 2 weeks without a phone. It was quite good, actually. I was able to text, but no one could ring me. But by God, my voicemail was full when I got back. Anyway, so it's just putting it out there that, you think you've got a 4G phone, because my phone was 4G, and it didn't work under the new regime. So it also has affected apparently 8 million Australians. So they're not very happy either. But just a pre-warning that I got caught after I was told I was fine.
Yeah, so through the chair, I just hope some of our monitoring sites don't hop on a plane sometimes. So, yeah. But yeah, we've been rest assured that we've got that they're functioning going forward. And then I suppose the other thing is to look at why are we leaving it so late to do the upgrade. It's because the device or the modem is actually buried inside a logger. So we want to make sure that logger does its life before we're throwing stuff out unnecessarily soon. So that's the reason we're sort of running pretty close to the finish line of the network closure. But yeah, thanks for your thoughts and comments.
Did we know quite a long way ahead of time that change was going to happen? And was that included in our budgeting somewhere?
Yeah, it was included in the budget, and like we said, we've had notice of that closure for some time.
Yeah.
But the reason I just outlined, that's why we're trying to run it to the finish line. We don't want to throw out a device that's still got life in it left.
Yeah.
So yeah, get it there.
Thank you, Councillor Butler.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, thanks for the report. And yeah, I just want to continue on about the remote flood monitoring stations. And, we tend to think, well, remote, and that they maybe can come, further down the track in priority. But in actual fact, farmers rely on those to shift their stock to higher ground and and take other actions in case of flood. So if what would your approach be if we find that in actual fact the funding bid is delayed for Kanoa, or are you confident enough that actually we don't have to think about having a plan B for that?
So through the chair, I think the plan B was already our existing target in terms of it's been in the LTP. Typically, our monitoring sites are replaced or upgraded on a 10-year cycle. That's about the life of the instrumentation that's in them. So that's this stage, like next financial year, we're moving into the upgrade of our flow monitoring stations because they're due and were done 10 years ago. So we do have plan B. I suppose the Kanoa funding enables us to do it more quickly. It also provides the opportunity to maybe add some enhancement that on plan B or the existing plan, we wouldn't have that opportunity. And some of that's around installation of real-time video for measuring of flood flows, which enables flows at monitoring stations to be measured remotely without staff having to be there and 24/7. We've already heard earlier today the issue about having staff available to respond. If we can get some technology to respond and collect that information on a staff member's behalf, that's a step forward. But with the existing funding, that would be a very drawn out process to make that enhancement. But with this, hopefully we can really put down and get it quickly.
Okay, thank you. I do just want to make the point that, for some members of our community, it is actually quite a crucial, crucial information. And is that contracted out, that work to upgrade the stations?
Yes. No, through the chair, the upgrading is done by our current staff. If we tap the accelerator button on that Kanoa funding, there would be the potential to have to contract either some existing work or that work out, and it would be a decision we'd make at the time.
Okay, thank you.
Such a lot of use made of the data that comes through from those stations, and I know that there's some people at home that have very specific understanding about when that river's hitting there at that flow, then this is going to get up then, and then that's going to get like it's been very, very helpful for people to understand. And some of the posts that go around during those weather events saying, what's happening up at one spec or something, and someone will come on that's very knowledgeable and say, actually, it's unlikely that we're going to get it going across somewhere because the QMX flowing, So it's fantastic that it's used so well, and it's it's echo, that it's a critical bit of kit for some people. Yeah. Councillor Mackenzie and then Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. Through the chair. Personally, I'm quite a big user of your rainflow, data. It's for people that live rurally. It's really, it's interesting, actually, and useful. And I just wonder, there's so much more that's actually there in your whole data portal. It's fantastic. And I just wonder, when was the last time we did a story in Newsline, or how do we make sure that our investment in the data portal and all the data, that we're actually making sure that our community get the maximum benefit from it? We need to sell it, I think. But anyway, I'd be interested in your comments.
Yeah, through the chair, I think, I'm not sure if they've done a review and gone out and seen what the users think. And I think that would be a very valuable process to go through, but also acknowledge that, the continued or new publication of information saying it's there, it's available for people to access is probably valuable as well to make them aware the service is there. Yeah, it's all very well. I mean, we've had two today sit there and say, living in the rural community, I'm looking at and using it, but I think there's probably a lot of other people who maybe need to have a look at it.
Well, I mean, I think that's my point, that we need to, make people aware of it and make it easy. Because actually, if you go onto the TDC website and you want to, the first thing you're thinking is rain, and you Google rainfall, you don't instantly link into the environmental data portal. You actually just go to the spreadsheet of rain. So I don't know, just to think about how we actually make everybody aware of it, and it pops up.
Thank you.
Just Googled it before you started talking about it, actually, and the image that comes up with all the little coloured squares, they're called something, aren't they? But just an image of that, and if we're doing some a good Facebook post or wherever, Newsline or something, like an image of that, so people can go, oh, there's all that tidal data, the weather station data, and it's probably underutilized. Do you think it's underutilized? Yeah, Rob's nodding. So that's just an attractive, obvious thing to look at. People are gonna easily go, oh, didn't it stormwater data somewhere? Been waiting for that in my life, so there's something in what you're saying, I think. Yeah,
and I think through the chair, just one of the things that's just triggered in my head straight away is maybe some snapshots of those screenshots, to the social media feeds at the time. Might be a useful thing if, I'd hate to think what the role of a flood duty officer is at the time when they're in the middle of one, but just to put that snapshot over, here's what's happening now. Just might light a wee fire for some people in an environment where they see that information, because we've got to remember that what are we up to now? Is it 20 years of age? Is the number that keeps going off my head, is that's the age of someone who's never lived without a cell phone connected to the network in their lifetime. Not that they have had a cell phone for 20 years, but that's how they live. And we've got to be in that world.
And that information that comes out of our hydro team here during those events, I think, is just so helpful and accurate and specific. How specific it is to Tākeka, what's happening in the Tākeka River or the Aorere, and I know that people, I repost that, and I know that people are really finding very, very helpful. And then the update, actually, this is what fell instead, and now we're looking at something. So always appreciating the service we're able to provide out of that information. Councillor Ellis, and looking for a mover of the report.
Happy to move, thank you. Thank you for this information. I mean, we can never have enough data, and it's quite expensive to get, isn't it? And it's fantastic, but it's kind of been touched on, and that people are able to go in and see what's happening further upriver, and they can take action accordingly. But could we have some explanation of, I mean, we've been aware of what happened in Esk Valley, and I'm sure our community would appreciate some reassurance about how this, because this is really what this information is about, so that we can warn our community and have really good information in the case of an event. And how does this data get used to warn our community?
Yeah, through the chair, that's quite a challenging question. Esk Valley, the Hawke's Bay Regional Council lost the ability to access the data from their network at the peak of the rainfall. At the same time, had they had that information, they'd also lost the ability to communicate with their community in any form whatsoever. So it's a perfect train wreck. And all we can do is build on the resilience to the extent we can, to the extent we can afford to. And I suppose the upgrade of the website, increasing the pipeline, making it cache more and things like that, and it working through these two events in April is an example of one small step we can make in that direction. So what we want to do is, build more resilience around, the monitoring sites. Is that duplication or replication? or is it just more redundancy at the individual sites? That's all part of what we're reviewing. And what's happened is on the back of Cyclone Gabriel is there's a group, or not a group, the groups that work on it are looking at trying to set a standard for monitoring sites nationally of what they should be built to, and those sort of things. So hopefully we'll see some, nationwide standards, because I suppose the biggest frustration for me is that, well, even as a commuter on a work basis, I leave Marlborough, I drive through Nelson, and I end up in Tasman. I've got to look at 3 websites to see that information. But as a person using the environment, I don't see the black line. So, building stuff up nationally, seeing that replication, assisting some of the people in Hawke's Bay at the time of the event, we were able to provide them satellite imagery of the inundation areas before they could have got out of the ground and seen where it was themselves from outside, totally remote. And it's building on those things rather than just, that was a nice idea, we managed to do it at the time, make it happen all the time. And I suppose the other thing too is they lost access to their probably over 3/4 of the network. Other councils outside the area could see more of their network than they, because the mobile network was still working, but just not to their office. So it's all that sort of stuff, and we just can't sit in our own little corner and do it by ourselves. I think our replication and redundancy by helping with our neighbours and doing stuff nationally is the way to go.
It's really reassuring.
Yeah.
Yeah, through the chair, if I could, on the back of that, can you see why we think he's so awesome? I also forgot to say that Mike is the president of the New Zealand Hydrological Society, which Joseph Thomas was beforehand. So Tasman certainly contributes a lot nationally. We don't pay for all that, remember, they are paid for by the society members. So part of what Mike was talking about with that Kanoa funding, so we've done incredibly well with Kanoa funding for our Motueka stock banks, is around that building that resilience faster, so that 10-year, bringing it back to maybe 5 years, whatever. But part of that resilience is also looking at the individual sites and saying, which of our sites are the most important sites for the team to be able to respond in a time of emergency, and then making sure there's redundancy at that site. So sometimes that redundancy might mean actually 2 kind of parallel recording systems. It might mean that there's a radio as well as a cell phone, or if you were to go to Horse Terrace, you'll probably find a satellite phone that's bullet direction. So looking at how do we make sure that if one form of communication goes out, that we still have a way to see this. And the other thing, a plug for the team, Tasman is incredibly lucky that we've got long-serving hydrological staff. Across the country, we've got this real shortage of hydrological staff. And another plug, it's getting embarrassing now, he won't be able to leave the room soon. Mike is part of the team, along with the likes of Martin Doyle and some others around the country. The old codgers got together and they have got a competency framework which is now run through an ITO, so industry training organisation. So all of our hydrologists coming through are trained to a consistent standard. Unfortunately, not all councils are doing that yet. The more progressive councils, the ones who value this data more, that's a little bit pejorative of me to say, are really pushing this, and Mike is a creditor for that. So we've been able to kind of get a little bit extra out of Mike, because we know that he's also one of the accreditors. So all of that process means that the system is a rigorous end-to-end system. So it's not people in isolation, it's people within a system around them, which is incredibly lucky. And being a unitary allows us to really look at that, because we can talk to our roading people and to our compliance people. And that's, I'm a real fan of the unitary model, because it allows that cut right across. And also between our local councils at a staff level, they talk to each other. So we provide the flood warning service for Nelson City. And then when there's issues around how a site works or whatever, there's a dialogue between the staff. So this is one of those areas that the staff, we are really well served by the staff here, and we are, as a country in the hydrological space and in the civil defence space, really aware of what happened up in Hawke's Bay, and so really working towards that. And one of Te Ura Kahika's subgroups is around floods. So we have a rivers group and a flood group and a biosecurity compliance. In the flood group, Martin Doyle fronts that. And so we're actually getting a consistent approach to flood response across the country. You kind of think 2025, this stuff's all sorted, 50, 100 years ago. Surprisingly not. And Mike talked about that standardization. So actually, when we have a resilient site with redundancy built in, what does that look like? So part of Mike's approach has been working with nationally to make sure that happens. So it's a really nice picture. It is expensive, it is slow, which is why we're looking for external funding, but it is planned. We're not reactive. We're actually doing this in a studious way.
Thank you.
Just a question from me, actually, Mike. We've got a staff member who's just fulfilled 45 years of service and he's retired. And his parting wish is that the council gets access to a rain radar. And that's recently been covered in the media here. And I'm just wondering if you could provide some comment to councillors to see whether we can fulfil his parting wish.
Through the chair, his parting wish. So as part of that Kanoa funding, believe it or not, there is a radar being put in through the bid. It was supported by us. It was put through by others because it's a perceived hole in the radar network. Because those that understand radars, you look at the radar map of New Zealand and you think Tasman's covered. It is, but it's about how many kilometres in the air was where the radar signal comes from. So there's a whole lot of rainfall that falls underneath the radar that is not detected by it. So it's a natural gap. So there is funding bids being put into the air. It's going to be challenging pulling together not just the local share, but the joint funding to go with that. Because believe it or not, the Met Service radar network and their whole observation network is worse than our Harbour Masters boat. If they wish to upgrade any of the capital on that network, they have to put a budget bid through Cabinet. It is not an automatic replacement by any means at all. So that whole radar network is at risk through becoming obsolete and old if those funding bids don't go through. So we might be a step closer, Kim, but I'm not sure how close. I think it might be Martin Doyle's parting wish that a radar was here as well.
Who's putting the bids for the, there's a joint thing going on there, but is there a primary?
So Te Rere Kaika are the primary, application for the bid. So it's a collective across all regional councils being put together as that resilience funding that we were successful in for some of our stock banking systems 12, 18 months ago. Yeah.
Okay, I got it now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you want something extra?
Yeah, it was just a further to that. I mean, I recall from way back when we did have a discussion about the rain radar coverage, and we attempted to use a ship's radar. I mean, how has that gone? What happened with that in the end? And has that provided any form of
through the chair that
temporary knowledge, or it just wasn't? I think because I remember it being it was a bit of an experiment at the time.
Yeah, so through the chair, it was one of the items I actually chose not to put in my report. It was one of the ones I was going to. Sorry. Yeah, so you can't hit you with too much information. So, hey, it was purchased, it was installed. It has been operational and it has been working through these events. Sadly, it's never going to produce a downstream data feed that we can suck up in models and things like that. Does the concept of it work? Absolutely. Have they seen some events coming across the bay? Yes, they have. So it's an observer tool. Sadly, only one person can look at it at a time. Hey, good on Martin. He's put something together, made it work, and does it add a piece to the pie? Yes, it does. Is it the best piece of the pie? It's something, and it's a step in the right direction. And more importantly, it hasn't cost you a lot of money and resource to get that picture.
Great, thank you. We've got a mover. Councillor Ellis moved. Do we have a seconder? Perhaps not. Councillor McKenzie. Thank you. Very good to meet you and get some of the lowdown on this area. I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Welcome, Alistair. Some more cleanliness in the room. It's just really interesting, isn't it? Hearing about, just hearing in behind about just the technicality of it all and how clever it all is. And yeah, there's just something about that interface coming right throughout to the community and public that we've spoken about. But yeah, I do think we need to really find a way to help people understand what's going on in here, especially the folk that say, what are all those people doing at council? Welcome, over to you for your report.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. I'm happy to take the report as read. I can give some highlights if you'd wish, but I also appreciate that we're getting close to lunchtime. But I'm very happy to take questions.
I've got two questions. First of all, there's been a bit in the media about the natural hazards going on to LIM reports and fears about it affecting insurance. And the media particularly has referred to Section 74 notices. And I mean, my immediate thought is that Tasman District Council is not rushing into that, and that other councils. But you know, are we putting have we put any Section 74 notices on any of our titles, or have we got? Are we putting information onto titles that could, you know, seriously affect people's insurance cover? I mean, it's something we have to bear in mind, don't we? We can't actually ignore it and say, well, that's nothing to do with us, that's to do with insurance, because people are very concerned.
So through the chair, so there's two questions there. The first one with regards to hazard notices. Yes, there was a story in the newspaper that I saw in the last week that was talking about hazard notices, as they're sometimes colloquially referred to. So the natural hazards team works very closely with the building team. And so just to give you a really quick overview of the process, when somebody's applying for a building consent, the natural hazards team reviews the consent for that building, and we provide information to the building team about any hazards that might be that might have the potential to impact the building and the land on which the building is located. And we're always looking to work with people who are building buildings to make sure that they have, you know, resilient buildings and that they're safe places of refuge during things like floods, for example. In some circumstances where people are building a building, or the level at which they're building a building doesn't meet the standards that are out there in terms of that we have to follow, and we have guidance and other sort of direction, whether it's determinations from MB or legal precedent that we follow. And in those situations, it can be that you're not complying strictly with the building code, but that it's okay to have a building there. And those are the situations broadly in which we would then recommend to the building team that you can let this building be built, but there is a hazard here. People need to be made aware of it, for example, if they buy that property in the future. And also to protect council from liability, so that, you know, we're acknowledging that there's a hazard. We're making the people who are building the building aware that there is a hazard. And we're saying, please don't come back to council and say, my house has just been wrecked because a flood came through here. You know, we gave you fair warning about that flooding. So that's the background context. Do we apply hazard notices to properties? Yes, we do regularly. And there's two reasons for that. One, as I've already mentioned, it's a liability to council and the ratepayer. It's about making people aware of the contexts in which they're undertaking these developments when they're doing it. And it's to make sure that there is a record there on the title for somebody who comes along in the future. The second part of your question was, are we providing information to people, for example, on LIMS that has implications in terms of their insurance? So obviously I can't speak to the implications of that information from an insurance point of view. I can say that, yes, there is implications for people's insurance to the information that we provide. I would note, for example, that the former mayor of Kapiti Coast District Council wrote an opinion piece in the paper in the last week in which they've written to the Insurance Council, and they've sort of asked some questions of the Insurance Council about what are you doing with the information that's provided by council, and where do you sort of think the line is between the role of the Insurance Council and the role of councils and so on. And he was calling the Insurance Council out there because they wrote them that letter 6 months ago, and the Insurance Council has been quiet on the subject. We have information known to council, whether it's information that we collect after events, or whether it's information that we have produced. Flood modelling would be a good example of that. And the reason that we produce that flood modelling is that we want to ensure that when people are building buildings in places, that they're doing them in safe locations and they're resilient buildings. The consequence of having that information, though, is that we need to provide it to people when they get a limb, and then consequently insurance companies ask that question, and then that information goes on to insurance companies. Yeah, but I can't speak to what insurance companies do with that information, I'm afraid.
Thanks very much for that, because I think that there is concern out there. I've just got one more question. Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Right. Yeah, just in relation to, I'm just looking at point 8.1, the coastal surveys, just as an example. And do you you have said in relation to the estuary surveys that you do ground truth, you have ground truth and you go out there to log. Has that been the case with the coastal surveys that you've done as well? Do you actually, because if it's as we know from rivers, which have been doing that for a long time, that when you actually go there, you might see some things that actually make you think, oh, well, maybe it's not quite like that. So that's my first question. My second question is, what is the connection between that information and resource consenting and the process of resource consenting, and for you giving that information, what is the process? Is that information then taken by the resource consents department and kind of sifted or taken as is, or what? If you know what I mean? Yeah.
So through the chair, so the surveys that I've referred to in the report there, so those are unmanned aerial vehicle or drone-based surveys, and they use a methodology or a technique called photogrammetry. And that involves the drone flying over the landscape and taking a whole load of overlapping photographs. And the great thing about the software that we use is that when you have photographs of a feature from different angles or different points of view, the software can use those photographs to build up a 3D representation. To get to the question, which is, do we ground truth? It's really key that we do ground truthing. And the way that we do that is through what's called ground control points, or GCPs. And these are either, we use square lino tiles in some cases, because they show up really nicely in the photos, or we will just spray paint marks on the ground. And we also have GPS survey gear, and you can see my colleague Brian in one of the photos earlier in the report where he's using one of the GPS survey instruments that we have. And so we survey in the position of those marks on the ground, and then those marks are captured in the photographs. And then in the software, we say that mark is exactly in that location, and that mark is exactly in that location, and that enables the 3D models that we build up to be accurately located in space. And one of the key reasons that we do that is that if we went to the same beach and we flew it several times, then we'd be able to compare the different surveys. Whereas if we didn't have the ground control to lock those surveys together, we wouldn't be able to make robust comparisons. The second question was, I think, essentially asking, what do we do with that information? So the two examples that I gave in the report, they are examples where we've got ongoing resource consent applications. And so the information that we are collecting there enables the Natural Hazards and Geomorphology team to provide accurate and up-to-date advice to different parts of council. Often that is the resource consenting team, and also as we work through the resource consenting process, as I mentioned before, in the hazard space, but also in the sort of environmental monitoring, environmental management space, we've got a lot of information there that council holds, and we can make that information, including the results of these surveys, available to people who are applying for resource consents, so that they can use that information, in their applications when they are, for example, assessing how the environment has changed through time. So that's one way in which we use that information, and we do routinely provide it to people who are applying for resource consents, for example.
Thank you. Just to clarify, what I was actually meaning was, I understand what you're saying about making sure that the mark is this equivalent to what the map tells you, but I was actually thinking about actually looking at the environment, like, our modelling shows us that this particular beach is like this, but do you go along and actually look at that beach and see whether, on a view, is that right, or are there some other factors that might be influencing, just because that's of course how it would have been done in the past before we did have modelling. So I'm just concerned that modelling could actually relegate actual on-site visits and on-site viewing to a lesser role, when in fact it can actually have profound effects on people's assets and lives when we're looking at adaptation and making decisions about people's, where people can build and where they can't. And I just think we need to make sure that we've actually got that balance right.
So through the chair, so just to clarify, for example, we don't have any modelling of the positions of coastlines through time. I guess that's not. But to be clear, we do have statistical analysis of where coastlines are through time. So the way that we undertake that statistical analysis to derive trends of coastal behaviour through time is through the exact observations that we're talking about. So we need to go out there and make these observations of, for example, where the coastline is through time, what is happening on a beach. That then factors into our understanding of the trends of what's happening on the beach, and then from that we can also derive a better understanding of what are the processes that might be driving the trends that we're observing. So I would say that generally that no, we are not, for example, going out there and blindly applying modelling and not relating it to the real world. And certainly in the cases of beaches and coastal behaviour, our understanding of long-term trends is driven primarily by the observations that we make, not the other way around.
You happy to move? Yeah. Maru, thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'll second. This wave buoy off Bark Bay, it's not that big, is it? So has the Canterbury University given us this wave buoy, or when you say provided, like, so we own it now?
That's a great question. I don't know, strictly speaking, whether or not we own it. But what I will say is that Brian was at the Coastal Society conference and he was having a chat to Dr. Sarah McSweeney, and he literally said to her, "What's the chances of getting one of these wave buoys?" And she said, "Well, actually, we've got one spare and we're looking for somewhere for it to go. Would you put it out and maintain it?" So And I guess insofar as possession is 9/10 of the law, or so the old proverb goes, if you watch American detective movies, then it's in our bay, and our harbour master goes and services it. So I'd like to say that it's pretty much ours. But if they asked for it back, then I don't think I would fight them too hard on it, because they've been very generous to us.
And given the data we're getting off it is brilliant, these only have a certain life expectancy of say 5 years or something or other. So we would put it in a replacement program because it's so important to us now, and maybe a series of them out there.
Through the chair, that's a great point. So the way that I see this buoy is that it's a really cheap, low cost feasibility test for council to really understand, at very low cost to the ratepayer, what we can achieve with this sort of instrumentation. And then we'd be looking to potentially secure some funding for wave buoys to replace this wave buoy, or perhaps some more wave buoys in some other key locations in the next LTP.
Great, thank you. Councillor Maru, then Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Alice. I just want to explore the Section 74 notices a little bit further from Councillor Butler. So if we're putting those notices on to mitigate council's responsibility in the future, what happens if there's houses and buildings built pre this that haven't had a Section 4 putting in? Are we saying that council has some liability if current landowners now go, well, there's natural hazard, we didn't know about that, council? So what's the difference between retrospect and current? So we're putting it on currently to mitigate liability to a certain extent. What's our liability currently when your point does have a Section 74?
Through the chairs. So just to clarify, but I think that to the councillor, so we're not abdicating any kind of responsibility, but we are very much making sure that council's liability is contained there. And so that would be a difference, just perhaps in terms of the word responsibility versus liability. At the moment, under the current iteration of the Building Act, which I think dates to 2004, these are notices that are applied through Section 71 to 74. So we call them, 72, 73, 74 notices. And that's just depends on which section people happen to be picking as to what they call them. But there was a provision to provide similar notices under the previous iteration of the Building Act, which I believe was 1992 off the top of my head. I think they were notices from a section in the 50s, one of them, maybe Section 58 or something like that. So there is a long history, I guess, is the point there, of building consent authorities providing these notices going back through time.
Might be a question for you, might be a question for consents or building. But so if it happens that there's a Section 74 or 72 put on my section, and then I get an engineer in and he disagrees with it and it gets removed, do the adjoining sections then get removed as well, or does each individual property owner have to go through the same process to get that removed?
Through the chair. So just to clarify the process. So this only arises because somebody's applying for a building consent through council. So council is not going out and looking at land and going, oh, that looks a bit dodgy over there, I'm going to go and put a hazard notice on that property. So hazard notices are applied through the building consent process. It could be the situation that a building has been built on a particular section, and at the time that that building was built, there was a hazard notice placed on the title for that particular section, and it could be the case that the house next door doesn't have one, and that could arise through the fact, for example, that the house next door that's been an existing building for many years, perhaps even predating the previous iteration of the Building Act, and they haven't undertaken any substantial renovations, and therefore council hasn't processed a building consent and hasn't therefore recognised the hazard in that context. Does that answer
It does. And so there's, in terms of things like Plan Change 85, there's no end point where that has a natural hazard overlay that's going to affect or impact Section 74 is being put on blanket parts of our district because of a plan change.
So through the chair, there is, these are totally separate contexts. So Plan Change 85, that's for the colloquially called the Natural Hazards Plan Change for the TRMP. So that would apply in a resource consenting context. What we're talking about in terms of hazard notices under the Building Act, that's through a building consenting context. Oftentimes people will need to get a resource consent and then they will need to get a building consent. And in situations where somebody's applying for a land use consent and we can see that there is a hazard to their property, we, as a process, we provide advice notes to people so that we make them aware at the time of the resource consent that, you know, just be aware that your property's subject to flooding and, for example, and at the time of the building consent, you may, not predetermining the outcome, but you may get a hazard notice recommended. And that allows people then to go eyes wide open into the building consent process to make sure that they're aware of the implications, because getting a hazard notice, it has implications on insurance, and that can then have flow-on implications in terms of finance through the bank. But it's definitely not the case that, for example, there might be an overlay that enters into the TRMP through the Plan Change 85 process that then results in hazard notices being applied on large areas of the district. That's not the case at all.
Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I don't actually have a question, but I did want to make a comment. I just wanted to express my appreciation for the staff that were involved in the Plan Change 81 and 85 consultation that we went out. Some of those conversations were really tricky and challenging for people, and I appreciated the clear and concise and easy to understand language that staff used in those situations, because it is a challenging area for a lot of our community, and the hardest part is not knowing what's going on, and I found some of those explanations extremely useful. So I just wanted to pass that on, so I appreciate that. And for using the word geomorphology in your report. I just love that word. Thank you.
Thank you, through the chair. And I just like to acknowledge that, yes, the natural hazards team was involved in that, but it was led by a lot of staff out of the environmental policy and other staff members primarily in John Ridd's area. But it was a really great example of staff across a range of work areas coming together, and I agree that the conversations were at times trying, but I think they were really valuable conversations, and I think that there's a lot of value to be had in going out to the community and having these conversations.
Thank you very much. Receiving the report's been moved by Councillor Butler and seconded by Councillor Kinnemont. If there's nothing further, I'll put the resolution.
I'll just quickly say congratulations for getting onto the National Working Group.
Oh, through the chair. Thank you very much, and that was just me being cheeky and asking, to be honest. But if you don't ask, you don't get. So, but there's always value, you know. And Rob was talking before. I think there's a lot of staff across council who are trying to add value and bring knowledge back to council where they see the opportunity to contribute onto different working groups. And I think that it does add a lot of value to council, and it makes it easier from staff's point of view to be able to implement and respond to the changes that we've been delivered. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Butler. I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you very much. And it brings our meeting to a close. So thank you all for your contributions today. Some pretty interesting goings on, and I appreciate your thoughtful approach to the range of kaupapa here. I'll close with karakia. Thank you for those on the flight deck. Very good support to us. Thank you. He karakia tātou. Tawhiri mai ngā hua o te taiao, mai a papa tuaniku e takoto nei. Kia rangi nui e tū iho nei, tūturi whakamaua. Kia tina hui e, kai ki e. Thank you. Back here at 1:30 for Freedom Camping.